if we move or cut Jimmy, who are some free agents that we could bring in to bolster our roster? Grant, I'm going to kick it to you because this is a topic you've been talking about very recently. And there's one name you've been preaching, and I agree with that name. So I'm going to kick it to you to mention him.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. Justin Houston. I think Justin Houston is having a Hall of Fame career. I mean, he's got almost 100 sacks. He's, I think, not even 32. He might just be about to turn 32. He had 9 sacks last year. He had 9 sacks the year before that. He's incredibly efficient. He had a couple of years where he was hurt, but every year that he's been healthy, he's been good. He's been healthy the last few years. He's waiting for the right, offer. Jadeveon Clowney waited till the very end last year. He's going to sign eventually. And if it's not with the 49ers, it'll be with another contender. So he can either help them or he can hurt them. So seems like, why would you not want this guy? He played on the same defense as D Ford and was always better than D Ford. So bring him back. Now you can have the whole crew back together. Justin Houston. That's just for starters too. You guys can take it from here.
Blake?
I thought that's a good one. And just to expand on that, like with the Colts, he was more of like a situational pass rusher, and that's all he would need to be on the Niners. Right. 3rd and over 7 and more, just throw in Justin Houston and have him go maybe 10 snaps a game or something. And
leave the run defense for other people, man. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. So the name I was thinking of is, I'm surprised this guy hasn't been signed, but he's a safety, which I think would help a lot. And that's Malik Hooker. Now, he's more known for just being a single high safety and just more of a deep ball hawk. But I thought he played pretty well on the Colts, and they switched up their defense to something he's not as accustomed to. And he also had injury problems. But I think as a ball hawk, he would be a solid get for the Niners, and he would not be overly expensive if he's still a free agent at this point. And we all know the Niners are about 1 or 2 injuries away from their secondary being pretty depleted. So I think adding another guy, especially of his caliber, would be a really good get.
Yeah, so real quick on Hooker, because I actually agree with both of those positions, and I think those are the 2 things that need to be addressed. They need to get safety and preferably a guy who has the range to play single high, because to me, there's only 2 safeties on the roster that currently have that range, and both of them are injury risks in Ward and Tart. My thing with Hooker is that I just think he's not a good enough run defending safety for the 49ers liking. And part of the reason, Grant, you were banging on the table, why isn't Tarvarius Moore getting in the game? Boom. They preferred Marcel Harris because Tarvarius Moore struggles at closing angles in the run game. Sure. Malik Hooker, if you watched him at Ohio State, he looked a little bit kind of like Ed Reed, the way he was baiting quarterbacks, the ball skills, the range he showed. But he was horrible at defending the run. John Gruden said he wouldn't draft Malik Hooker in the first round because he thought he was so bad in the run game, the angles he took to the ball and all of that. So, but for the role that Blake is talking about, I agree. Sign Malik Hooker, because to me, I'm a fan of the 3 safety lineup for the 49ers.
What about Earl Thomas?
I think he's done.
Is he done?
Okay. I think so.
Okay.
It seems like you would think, right?
Just throwing that out there. Never mind.
Personally think he's done. Think he's done.
Fine.
But I do want to touch on the name that you touched on, man. Justin Houston. To me, that's the guy that they need to sign. First of all, Justin Houston, 5 years ago, I feel like people don't realize how good of a player he was. He had 22 sacks in his season, was one of the main contenders to win Defensive Player of the Year. This guy is a bad man, but he's also had seasons upon seasons of 8 to 9 sacks. Second of all, he's just 32 years old. I think when I evoke the name Justin Houston, people are thinking 35, 36. For reference, Julius Peppers, who obviously is one of the freakiest players of all time, he's a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm not comparing the 2 of them as players. He was signed by the Green Bay Packers when he was 34. And he also was coming off an 8-9 sacks, couple seasons of 8-9 sacks, just like Justin Houston. And Julius Peppers was a 3-down player for the Packers, and just
he was really good. He was really good.
Because he's one of the great super freaks in NFL history. But Houston is just a situational pass rusher with Bosa, with Armstead, with developing Kinlaw, DJ Jones. He would kick butt for the 49ers. To me, it's a no-brainer, the fact that he's right there. And that brings me to my second point, right? We're talking about moving off of Jimmy, and it could be Justin Houston, it could be Malik Hooker. But I also think having an extra $10 million to play with is really important. One of the mistakes the Niners made last year is that they didn't even have enough money to move guys to and from their practice squad because of their cap. They need that money to play with because they have to understand our team gets injured. And when our team gets injured, we have to constantly make roster moves, right? It can't just be Ziggy Ansah who you pay basically the rest of your cap to, and he gets hurt in half a game, and that's that to your cap room, and you don't have time to, you don't have the money to move players around. And number two, it's having that money to play with, because this team, right, we've talked about it. If the people stay healthy, things go right, all of a sudden we could be looking at them week 6 and they're 5-1, and we're like, whoa, the Niners have a chance at the Super Bowl this year. And if they're in that situation, there are still holes at receiver, the secondary, and everything, edge rusher, that they need to address. And there will be guys that come Emmanuel Sanders like open during the trade deadline, and you want to have that money to play with, so that, because they can't afford to give up a lot of picks, so you want to be able to take on contracts and do stuff like that. Like Stephon Gilmore is the perfect example of that.
Yeah.
So I think that from that standpoint, it's not only imperative when you move off of Jimmy to get a Justin Houston or a Malik Hooker, but it's also imperative to keep that money, because you need that. You need that flexibility.
Yep.
Here's my question to you guys, though. Do you think they still need Houston when they've gone out and got Ibukam and Arden Key? And I know Maurice Hurst is an interior guy, but they also got him. So do you think those guys could do similar to what Justin Houston would do? I mean, mainly the first two. Or do you think there's still room for Justin Houston somewhere in this lineup?
Why not have a 3-man rotation of Bosa, Ebukam, and Houston from the edge? I mean, what's wrong with that? Like, Green Bay has a 3-man rotation. They got Gary, Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith. 3's better than 2, especially with Bosa. You never know what he's going to do.
That was gonna be my point.
Yeah.
Bosa, to me, this defensive line looks great if all these guys are playing next to Bosa. They don't have another guy. D Ford's the other guy, but D Ford is injured.
Yeah.
They don't, and Eric Armstead is the other. Eric Armstead does win by himself. He can't finish plays without other guys around him. That's his problem. So Bosa's the only guy who can win by himself. They need another guy who single, if he gets one-on-one with a tackle and Bosa gets a double team or something, he can go win on the edge, and that guy is Justin Houston. Ebukam is a great guy to have if you have Nick Bosa generating pressure. He'll get there eventually, and he's a high-effort player, and he's a very versatile player. But he was relying on Nick Bosa. Javon Kinlaw, to me, based on what I saw his rookie season, I'm more bullish on him than Grant. But to me, a lot of my optimism about him is that he's going to play next to Nick Bosa next year. So that'll automatically make him look better. But overall, because of that, and then Arden Key, look, I like Maurice Hurst more than I like Arden Key. My thing with Arden Key is I don't think you can bet on his personality one bit that he's a guy that's ever going to maximize his talent. What went wrong with the Raiders? It's not like they had edge depth just sitting in front of him. Like Clellan Ferrell has not lived up to what he's supposed to be. Mad Max Crosby is their one guy, and they went out and gave the big money to Unique Ngakoue because even though Arden Key is a very talented player, he never lived up to anything there. And then Maurice Hurst is a good athlete, an explosive athlete, but I just don't see him winning in terms of that competition for that interior defensive line. I think Zach Kerr is better than him in terms, especially as a run defender, and that's very important because of the way the Niners front works with the wide 9. I think Gibbons is better than him. I think Kinlaw is better than him. I think Jones is better than him. How many interior defensive linemen can you truly keep? They need a guy who's capable of winning one-on-one, and that guy is Justin Houston.